Hello and welcome to another Maya video. Now this one's quite a fun one because this one's got a lot of tools involved which are really fun and really useful for creating many different things. But they all come under the same umbrella of deformers. So I've got my standard Maya scene opened up here. I've got a few little examples here of things we're going to actually play with. And then at the very top here, we're going to be looking inside of deform. And now we're going to be looking at a few of these inside here, but the best ones, in my mind, are in the non-linear, which is where we're going to start off. So deform down to non-linear. Okay, so number one, going from the top, I'm going to do bend, the bend deformer. That one. Now I'm going to use it on these bricks, quote bricks. I'm going to make a bit of a wellhead with these, so I'm going to actually bend them round so they're actually coming towards a circle. So I'm going to go to deform, then down to bend, and then click bend, like that. Now what happens is it produces or creates this stick in the middle of our scene. Now this stick has some qualities to it. So if I go over to my channel box, we can see here we've now got shapes, bend one, handle shape, and inputs shape. So in inputs, I'm going to keep saying shape, sorry, bend, inputs bend. I'm going to open input bend 1, and then we'll have got a few little options here. But what I'm going to do is just click on the word curvature. I'm not going to click on the actual numbers. I'm going to click on the word curvature and then just middle mouse and drag in the scene. And what we're going to see is this little arm appear. So what's happening is it's showing us the effector, or what's actually being produced. This is the curve which is being produced, and then this is the origin point. The actual straight part is the origin point. Now I can actually bend that around to be a full 360. Oh, it says here 180, but yeah, full 360. But you can see here that it's not actually affecting my geometry how I want to. You can see it's kind of having an effect on it, but not really what I want. So what I'm going to do is actually fully create a circle like this, and then because I've got this selected, I've not got the geometry selected, and you can see here I've got my geometry selected and the wire turns purple. Now remember, purple indicates this is being controlled by the purple object, so my geometry is being controlled by this shape. So what I'm going to do is just start to rotate it, because this is still an object inside Maya. You can see it's kind of reacting to me moving it around. I'm going to rotate it round like that. Well, it's not quite working how I want it to just yet, but I'm going to lie this down, lie this stick down so it's actually going across the entire length, because this stick is actually the exact same length as these bricks. Maya knows how to calculate that, so what I'm going to do is start rotating it around like that, and you can see I've got some pretty cool effects partway through. I'm getting sort of like a helix partway through. So even if you're not using this to its completion, you're still getting some really cool shapes in there. So you can see there I've now completed a full circle, and I've still got complete control over the bend. So I can even open it up, close it up, and then I've got the envelope, which is essentially the opacity of the object. So you can see there, envelope down to 0, nothing's happening, because basically this is the strength of the object. So if I start to add that up, you can see here it starts to stretch and conform to the shape until we get the full shape of the circle. And then we've got a low bound and a high bound, and essentially this line that's in the middle is basically the middle of the object. So we've got a high bound and a low bound. So if I start lowering the low bound to 0, you can see there that there's actually no arm to affect it. So everything past this, as soon as this green shape ends, as soon as that bit ends, there's nothing there to affect it. So this is just going to kind of start just going off in a direction. So if I start to bring that back, you can see that the wire comes to about here, and then anything past that isn't affected anymore. So it just keeps going in a straight line. I lower it even more, you can see there the wire ends around here, so it's just going in a straight line. So I can even bring that all the way to the middle. So then I've got kind of like a right angle, but then I've still got control over the curvature. and then I can also affect the high bound. Now I've still got complete control. It's a very, very strong, simple but very, very strong tool. So I'll just reset those back to standard settings, like that. Now what's one really cool thing about this as well, because this is a movable object within Maya, if I start actually moving it, we get some interesting kind of occurrences. So you can see there, it's almost like a track that's pulling and pushing and pushing and pulling and pulls, like that. Now I'm just going to go back to this and bring one of my bounds to the bottom, like that. So I've got a curve that's perfectly halfway down. So I've got half of my bricks are straight and then half my bricks are curved. Maybe I don't want that. Maybe I want this to be somewhere else. I'm going to bring this down to about there, or maybe bring it up to about there, or maybe I want the curvature to be a lot less. So I can create a bit of a natural curve, or a bit of a longer curve. I can actually extend my high bound past the point, because I've moved this to further than halfway. I can actually extend my high bound to complete the circle. So if I go 1, it only goes halfway. But if I start to just increase that number, the curve goes further down. So there I can make some really nice big curves. And if I'm thinking modular design, there we go. If I'm thinking of modular design, then this could absolutely be a chunk of brick which I make tons of different bits from. One rule we have to stick to, though, well, we don't have to stick to it, but it makes it a lot easier for us when we are actually doing stuff, is we want to make sure that all this geometry is UV'd before we start deforming it. The last thing we want to do is have all this complex geometry curved and morphed before we start UVing it, because then it's going to be a real pain to actually start getting the proper shapes. So I would UV this first and then create all my cool little shapes. And like I said, this could be used for modular design, it can be used for environmental, creature, it can be used for whatever you want, you know. All it does is just curve and bend the object. You can even use it for animation. So if I actually want this to be kind of flexing, like doing this sort of thing, then if I, there we go. Nope, you can go away. If I have my animation timeline at 0, I will right click. So I'm got it in the first position. I'm going to right click curvature. I'm going to say key selected. That gets a little red dot, a little red block next to it, and then there's a little red line down here on the animation slider, which means I'll put a keyframe in, which is basically a point of animation, a frame of animation. And I'm going to move this all the way down to where I want it to go, animation-wise, frame-wise, and then I'm going to do that. So what I'm going to do is take this back and just give it a even number, looking even, and then key selected. I'm going to go to 40 and 30, key selected. I'm going to go 80, key selected. So now when I do some animation, I key the animation there, it's actually moving. Because what I'm doing is animating the bend deformer. And you can even take this into, because this is vertex animation, you could take this animation into Sketchfab. Or even Unity. Unity Game Engine handles vertex animation. Unfortunately, to my knowledge, Unreal Engine doesn't handle UV animation, vertex animation. But that's the bend deformer. It's really good. It's probably my favorite deformer that we have. Next, I'm going to go over to this this very, very dense piece of geometry here. And I'm only using this because I want to show you a couple of really, really cool deformers which kind of work the same way. So I'm going to go to sign. So yes, that's fine. And we get the same thing happening here. We get this stick growing in the middle, and then in the control panel we have this. But with this one, we have envelope, which is our strength. But we have a few different settings here. We've got amplitude, which is basically how strong these waves are. And then we've got wavelength. So if you give a bit of amplitude, and then wavelength is basically how many there are. The offset is basically, you can see here, it's actually having a bit of an effect already. It's the position of this wave. And then drop off is how far from the center the sine wave actually dies off. So if I rotate this into position, you are immediately going to see the effects. There we go. So it's a sine wave. So I can change tons of really cool things about this. There we go. Cool. So yeah, there's tons of different things we can do with this one. One of my favorite things to do is a flag. So we have this bit of animation. I'm going to actually move this to the end. You can see here we've got the same controls as with the curve. I can actually have this move across. You can see how it's affecting. We'll move it all the way to the end. So it's at the very, very last bit there. Oh, I've lost the visuals. So Maya seems to be having a bit of a hard time seeing this curve. This is very dense, so it might just be kind of messing up. So I'm just going to save and then bring this back. Okay, so I've got it back. Maya, we just didn't like what he was doing just then. So what I'm going to do is play with the drop off and have this react like it's a flag that is basically attached to a pole. So I'm just going to explore the different settings here, see which one. There we go. So that's the end of my flag where it's attached to the pole. This is where the flag is flapping off to the side. There we go. So just like I did before, I'm going to go to first frame, offset, key. So now that first frame is this. Now I have to kind of like experiment and work out where on the timeline this would offset to have my correct animation. So I'm just going to do a bit of experimenting. You can see that. So the animation is not perfect, but we've got a nice semi-looping bit of animation. Now there is things I can do to actually clean up this animation. One of them is to go into the graph editor of Maya and change this curved spline to a straight spline, because we're getting a slow in, slow out. And all I want is a straight line, because this is looping. I want it to be straight. Don't worry about learning that. You can see that everything's the same velocity going through. So now all I have to do is work out .9. There we go. So just with a little bit of experimenting, then I'm getting this really nice wave appearing. Now, yeah, this could be used for a flag. It can be used for drapery. It can be used for actual waves. If you could do something like this to simulate basic water, simulate basic moving tundra. You could even simulate. You could use this to do things like motion graphics, or like sci-fi computer screens which have all these moving graphics on them. You could use something like this to simulate that. So having a line of dots and having this graph kind of imitate this weird movement that would come from it. These sci-fi graphics you see a lot in games and high sci-fi. So that's the sine wave. Now the other one is a wave, which works a lot like sine, except from where sine has a point of origin going to the end. This is more of a radial sine. So we got a wave like that. So you can see here we've got a circle. So if I start to up my amplitude, you can see here straight away, you can see what's going on. Use my offset, you can, yeah. So it's exactly the same. Exactly the same. There we go. And I'm going to do the exact same thing again. I'm going to find that 0 point, keyframe, go to the end, and I'm going to .5. This looks about right. Keyframe that. And there we go. So I'm not going to go in and change the graph editor here, but here we've got actually, yes, I will, because I think learning and knowing how to do looped animation, even as an artist, is vital to do. So graph editor, change this to be a straight arc. There we go. So you could use this for all sorts of things. You could use this for for a pool, for water. This is quite an old-fashioned method actually of doing water. You see this sort of thing in a lot of old PS1 games because it's quite easy to manipulate geometry. It's hard to manipulate the appearance of certain things on a surface, such as like waves on a surface that aren't actually there, that you'd pull from a normal map. So that's the wave. And that's another favourite of mine. I think they're really, really cool. Oops. Maya doesn't like, well, Maya doesn't like having a lot of things there. So the other two I'm going to show, or the other few I'm going to show actually, the three I'm going to show. So two is going to be on this cylinder here. So I've got a basic cylinder, and then what I've got in Deformer is the flare, and the flare allows me to actually flare stuff out like that. Quite basic, but you can make a cone. And you can do some, you can animate this quite easily to do some sort of like breathing, or you could use this to do quick modeling. If you were doing a vase, for instance, you want to get this really, really ornate vase, you could do something like this. So you're using the flare to get a very, very even curve or bell. And then same thing with low bound, high bound. You've got tons and tons of opportunity of creating lots of cool shapes with that one. So that's the flare. The next one after that is the squash. And again, same sort of things, except this one will actually deform the height. So you can get some really nice cartoony squash and stretching on this one. And you can again set this to be, say, the bottom of the geometry. So this is one I'm not too familiar with, but I'm already seeing that I could probably use this to make a quick glass. See there, I've already got like a bit of a shape I could use, because it's not necessarily squashing, but I've kind of fudged it to create a glass of some variety. Like I said, I'm not super familiar with this one because I don't tend to use it that much, but it has got, as you can see, it's got some really nice capabilities. Again, it's just about exploring these different features. Now the last one is super good if you want to do any sort of like coiled phone wire, or in this case some rope. So I want to do actual rope. I'm not going to try and trick with any geometry or any sort of like mapping. I want to make coiled rope. Now in Deformer, I'm going to come down and go to Twist, which is that one. And this one does the same thing. It kind of points in the wrong direction, so I'm just going to rotate that round. So it's pointing down the right direction. Use Twist. You can see there, that's what it does. And it makes a really even twist as well, so it's not very uneven. There's not kind of a lot of parts of the mesh merging into each other. It actually twists it really nicely. So I'm able to make some really nice coiled rope. And you can even, for instance, maybe make high resolution rope, and then use something like transfer maps to actually then bake down that information into a map. Or maybe you're making wire, or anything that is twisted, you could use this. And then the whole high bound, low bound thing still works with this. So yeah, you are at complete mercy. Well, they are at your complete mercy. These are really, really strong tools. Now, one thing which is really annoying is if I want to say get rid of this deformer, I'm happy with this curved rope now. I'm like, oh yeah, that looks really nice. Again, I would have UV'd this ahead of time before I would have done any of this. Right, I'm going to get rid of this deformer because I don't want it, I don't need it. I want to clean my scene up a little bit. If I just delete the deformer, it deletes all the effects I've just done. Now that's obviously all my work gone. But it's really easy to actually maintain this. All I need to do is delete the history on this object, because you can see here, this is everything I've done to this object. This is all history. And I'm going to get rid of it. I want to get rid of this twist. Now what's going to happen is I'm going to get rid of this history, and then it's going to maintain the shape, but get rid of the actual deformer. So if I go up to Edit, Delete by Type, History, you can see there, now the deformer's gone. All my history is gone, but my shape still maintains. And then I can go in, use another deformer. Boom, there you go. Now to me that looks like a really nice elven bracelet of some variety. Obviously you'd need to make sure that when building or when kind of deforming you are making these meet up, but that's a really, really powerful tool to create lots of different objects. Or parts of objects. You could use this one piece to create many different things. This straight piece of geometry can turn into a bracelet, it can turn into some sort of handle for a basket, it can turn into baskets itself if you're going for something that's much more high resolution.